Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic Thursday. Welcome to our webinar event, Managing Employee Attendance Issues from Infinium HR. Most of you guys know me that are on the call. It's Mike Hayden here. Very glad to be with you, and I want to thank you for participating today. It's a very important subject that we've been seeing happen a lot. Issues surrounding this happen a lot more lately. So I'm really looking forward to going through this, and I'll try to respect your time this morning and get through it without going on with too many stories as I usually do. So you should be able to chat if you need to. If you have any questions during the event, please let me know and go ahead and pop something in the chat. That would be fantastic. Glad to answer some questions at the end if you have any. If not, we'll keep moving. So I want to make sure, first of all, that you have your coffee. If you don't have an Infinium HR coffee cup, please let me know. We will definitely send one out. I've got a whole bunch of them here, so I'll be glad to have that for you. So with that, I'll get started. We got a pretty good group on, so that's great. Okay, so this is an issue, again, I think that has been, just going to give you my qualification here on this issue. It's gotten a lot worse. I always say this. As many of you guys know me, I've been in this business for about 32 years, and I always say it keeps getting worse. And I don't think I'm wrong in saying that, because it does. It just seems like every event, whether it's a recession, which happened in 2008, or it was the second sort of recession, in the 2015-16 area, or it was 13 or 14. And then the COVID event. So all of these things really, really affect employees. And with that, you have a younger class of employees that are coming through the system and may not have the same work ethic as most of us may have, or what we expect out of our employees. So it becomes a very difficult line to cross with having to manage attendance issues, teach employees our culture, and help them to be productive members of our team. And then dealing with the ever-increasing laws and lack of, I would say, very tight labor market that we're in right now. So yeah, it's a lot of issues. So with that, we'll get started and go through some of the things. Some of this is a little bit cumbersome. It's a little wordy. I do apologize, but I wanted to get the points across. I'll try to skim through some of the stuff that doesn't require a lot of detail. Okay, so our agenda, what we're going to cover today is just the foundations of attendance and compliance with the new laws that are out there, what the legal landscape has for us in California, which is ever changing, and I'll show you how that worked out over the last couple of years. And then, when attendance and accommodation collide, and we're going to get into some of the leave issues that could intersect with sick time and with time off. So that's really, really important. That's probably going to be one of the most important parts of what we talk about, is how to define whether or not we really need to consider an accommodation issue, or whether there's a leave involved. So we'll go into that. Then we'll just get into some practical. I think that's going to be the meat of it for most of you guys, is like, how do I deal with employees that just don't want to show up, and they just don't understand the importance of showing up? And again, we see it all the time. So we'll go through that. And then, how do we build better attendance? How do we really set this foundation so that we can move forward and hopefully eliminate some of the problems? Okay, so let's talk about foundation issues, foundation of attendance. So obviously, this is how, oops, I kind of hit that a little bit fast. I wanted to show you my little animation, how cool it was. So these are the things that we face every day. And I want to say, you're not alone if you're facing these things, okay? People just have Monday-itis, Friday-itis. They're calling out late. They're not following procedure. They just, sometimes we can't figure it out. Do they just not care? Do they not have a concern for their teammates? Are they bad people? We've got to figure all that out. And that becomes part of the employer's challenge, I believe, is defining whether we've got a bad employee, or we've got, they're having some bad issues in their life. How do we deal with that? But it affects our business. So we have a right to be able to navigate through that and get to the meat of things with that particular employee. So why does this matter, right? Predictable attendance supports productivity. If I know my people are here, my team is here, the whole team is positively affected by that attendance, right? So it helps productivity. We don't miss deadlines with our clients. And chronic absenteeism increases cost and disruption. That's obvious stuff. It's just we got to have people fill in, or something doesn't get done. We end up losing money, or it just disrupts the business. And having to deal with an employee who is having issues, that becomes a disruption to the owners or the managers or HR, whoever's in your business that deals with these issues on a daily basis. Pardon me, I enjoy coffee about this time of morning, so I don't want to change it for the webinar. Please forgive me. Okay, then the hidden costs, right? It can destroy culture. People begin to wonder if you've really got a strong culture or not. If a problem is allowed to continue, the rest of your employees are going to see that, and they're going to understand that they're going to realize that maybe you don't have as much of a solid policy and a practice in your business, and then they're going to get frustrated because they've just got to do more work now because the employees aren't showing up. So one of the biggest issues is that California favors employees, right? When it comes to leaves and sick time and the rules surrounding it, getting it wrong can end up leading to legal challenges, and I've seen it happen multiple times. So attendance is operational. It's a culture issue. If you can't rely on your employees and your team can't rely on their teammates, then your culture just breaks down. And we've seen it happen a lot. We have a staffing company here too, so we know how that we see it every day. We get call outs every day, so we deal with this as well. Okay, so do you know what your attendance policy is, right? Yeah, we have a sick time policy, we have a vacation policy, but what is our attendance policy? Right? Does it make sense for your industry? And that's key right now. If you have a construction company and everybody's got to be on the job at 7 o'clock because the carpenters are dependent on the plumbers and the plumbers are dependent on the roofers, whatever it is, there's a tight schedule that you've got to adhere to, right? Or if you have a retail setting, or if you have a catering business and you've got a job out, someplace that people have got to be on time, the job doesn't get done unless they show up. But if you have an office, like our company here, if somebody gets here at 8:05, it's not going to destroy the business. If they're here 7:55, I'm okay. And so we have a little bit more flexible. So you've got to really understand your industry, your operation. Can you build some flexibility into it, or do you need to have a rigid, stringent attendance policy? So, and is it part of your culture? Do you talk about this? Do you celebrate it when people are here they're just here all the time? Sometimes we forget to celebrate people that show up every day. They're always here. They rarely take sick days off. They've got balances in their sick pay bank, at the end of the year. So sometimes we forget to do that. So make this part of your culture and try to build that just that awareness of how important it is to your business. So do you have that in place? That's the question. And then do you actually follow the written policy that you have? So if your attendance policy says, hey, you must notify us within an hour of your shift, it's got to be reasonable. It can't be like the night before. But if you require employees to notify you or the manager an hour before their shift, then are you actually practicing that? Are you holding people accountable to that? So things of that nature. Make sure your policy is in place, but you're actually doing what you say. And then have you applied it consistently? Did you do the same thing with Tommy as you did with Sally, right? Pretty basic. You've got to have that same consistency with all your employees. Make sure that the policy works for everybody. And then I ask you, and you can put it in the chat if you can you remember a time when an attendance situation went wrong? I'm sure we all have stories. We've got a ton. I was hoping one of our clients who had a recent issue was on today. Maybe he'll still step in. But yeah, so you got to think back. What went wrong? How do we learn from that? How do we make our situation, our policy stronger, our culture stronger by learning from that event? And these are challenging issues. They're annoying issues. Like I say, it's gotten worse. And without some sort of deliberate, clear, consistent policy and operational practice, we're not going to make it any better, and people are going to continue to take advantage of us. So make sure that you're thinking about that. And we can help you. If you guys need help with that at all, please feel free to reach out on that. So what about the legal landscape? So, oops, got a little weird animation here when I came in first. But we know all the different laws. We know sick time, right? So PSL, paid sick leave, it's 5 days per year. We'll go over that in a second. But there's a lot of overlapping laws, right? There's CFRA, California Family Rights Act, which allows protected leave for many situations. There's the ADA, which is the Disability Act. There's Fair Employment Housing Act. There's FMLA if you're a company that's larger than 50 employees. So there's a whole bunch of leave laws that sort of surround sick leave that we need to be aware of. And there's a lot of growing leaves that California keeps adding new leave protections, and that creates a higher compliance risk, which is something that you really have to think about. And you can really make a mistake very easily that a lawyer is going to pick apart. And again, consistency, knowledge of the leave laws, and documentation of the process that you're having with your employees, whether it's policy or whatever. And excuse me, something's driving me nuts over here. It keeps on blinking, and I'm going to shut it down if you don't mind. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that. And then there's been recent regulatory changes, right? So things have been changing. So I get a little backwards. Let's just put them all out there. So this bereavement leave came in 23. You got to offer your employees, I think it's 5 days of unpaid leave. Their expanded paid sick leave, which came up in 24, went from 3 days to 5 days. And if we see this pattern, then there's domestic leave now, which was really just a reconfiguration of how we can take domestic leave, but it's now being pulled up under sick leave. So if an employee has to go to jury duty or be on a jury or be part of they've been a victim of crime, or somebody in their family has, and they've got to go to court hearings or attend lawyer depositions, whatever, that is now part of sick time. So determining whether an employee qualifies for that's part of the detective that we've got to become. So we've got to consider all these leave protections that have, really just added this difficulty, this new level of challenge when situations arise. We've always got to think about this in the back of our mind, that it's there, right? We want to eliminate any possible, issues with leave problems. Okay, so we know the rules. Basically, it's 1 hour per every 30 hours worked. An employee can earn up to 40 hours or 5 days during the year, whether it's accrued or you can front load that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Annual use, we can cap that at 5 days or 40 hours. That was the 2024 update. And if you're using an accrual method, and this is important to realize, they're going to accrue, if they're 40 hours typically, they're going to accrue all up to 10 days, right? There's going to be 5 days sitting in kind of an invisible bank during the year, right? They've got the 5 days they can take, but there's another 5 days sitting there. So that 5 days carries over to the next year. So they start January 1st with 5 days. It could be unlimited. They could, let's say they didn't take 2 days and they've got 7 days sitting there, 8 days, 8 days will carry over and it'll be sitting in their bank next year. So the accrual will stop once they hit that 10 days, but they're always going to have sick leave. That was the way the law was built. Now, this changes a little bit if you do lump sum. And I'm starting to become a bit of this is basically my preference for companies because of the issues that can happen with remaining sick leave or accrual that's for a new employee, let's say, right? So that happens after 90 days, or they're accruing it once they start, but that becomes available at 90 days. Well, if they're having attendance issues and they're still accruing their 5 days, you can't discipline them because they've got this ongoing, provision of sick leave. So it becomes a little bit muddy on when you can actually do that, but you don't have that issue with lump sum. I give somebody 5 days a year, the beginning of the year, the beginning of their employment, and that's it. They run out. There's no more accrual. There's no more days coming in. There's no carryover. It's a very simple way. So if that works for your business, consider, making that change at some point. I'd probably wait till the beginning of the year to make that change, but it is something that you can do. And I really, really strongly, if anybody has any sort of they're using PTO, which is basically a combination of vacation and sick leave. I highly recommend we don't do that. It just becomes very, very complicated to go back and forth between whether they're taking a day off vacation or a day off sick time. And now if you're giving them 10 days of, let's say, PTO or 15 days of PTO, their right to attendance, their protection from disciplinary action is ongoing. It's going to be there as long as they've got time sitting in the PTO bank. So it's much better to separate those two issues, give them vacation if you want, have it separate, and then give them sick time. That way you can really monitor when they're calling out, when they're just not showing up, whatever. It can be part of that sick time accrual reduction, which then means I can now move towards disciplinary action if I have to. So it really limits you. It kind of locks you into a kind of an unwinnable situation when you do that. So highly recommend. So, and the reasons why employees can take this time off is expanded. We used to say, well, it should only be for sick and I need to get a doctor's note. Well, you really can't require an employee to prove why they're taking a day off, during the 5 days anyway. They have the 5 days available. It's now personal health needs, caring for family members, victims of crime or abuse, legal obligations, serving on a jury. It just keeps expanding. So it's really difficult for us to really decipher what's going on with that employee until we can get past that 5 days. And now we can begin to scrutinize their absenteeism. So we'll talk more about that as we go. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm talking about, disciplinary issues, right? So there's no retaliation. You cannot discipline them during while they have protected leave available. And this means, again, going back to that lump sum, if they run out, and now we can begin to deal with it, right? So you cannot retaliate. You cannot ask them for doctor's notes. You cannot, and this is kind of key, or important, I should say. If they are through their 5 days, right? So let's say they use 5 days, they have bad flu, COVID, whatever it was in the beginning of this first 6 months of the year, they use up their 5 days. And now they still get sick again, maybe in August, or another day off in September. Well, you really can't say, well, my gosh, my employee's taking 7 days off. No, he's taking 2 days off. That were not protected. So you got to be careful not to use that if you're disciplining them and saying, oh my gosh, you've taken 6 days off this whole year. He said, well, yeah, but 5 of them were my protected paid sick leave. So you got to be careful with that. Don't consider that. And then the point is, when does it become excessive? When can we actually deal with that? And we'll talk about that in a moment. So identify abuse only when there's a clear pattern, right? It's pretty obvious, and that sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. But we want to separate that protected time from time that is excessive absenteeism that goes beyond that. And limit medical note requests. You can request, if they're going to be for 3 days off, let's say more than 3 days, you can request a doctor's note, especially when they want to come back. So let's say somebody's out for a whole week. I've had the flu, and they want to come back Monday. Well, I don't necessarily want somebody coming back in that is, that's still carrying this flu with them, because if any of you guys went through it in the last month or two, it was really bad, and it definitely took a few people out for a few days. So just limit that. You need to know when to ask for a doctor's note, when not to ask for a doctor's note. We're here. This is what we do. Please call us. Like, hey, I've got somebody that's been out for 2 days or whatever it is. Please call us. Let us know before you take action or request medical certification. Let's talk about it, because every situation is different, and sometimes we've got to nuance the situation in order to find the right timing to do that, and so forth. And then again, I'm a fan of lump sum. Consider that to avoid timing issues with whether they have accrual or not. That's really important to get through that. So the fine line, right? So when does it become abuse? When is it legitimate? When do I just have an employee that's having some health issues? California strongly favors the employee when it comes to paid sick leave or leaves. It's a very protected little world that California has created around the employee. So if the evidence isn't clear, assuming the absence was lawful, really minimizes your legal exposure. But again, at that, where's that fine line? And that's really important to understand. And we'll talk a little bit about when enough is enough. Okay, so I'm going to talk about leaves a little bit. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. We're going to go over them just as more of an awareness what's the word I'm looking for? An awareness effort exercise, an awareness exercise. I believe we'll set a leave management webinar up probably in about 2 months, because I think it's pretty important for everybody to understand that. Now, we don't want to make everybody HR folks, not necessary, but you do need to be aware of what's out there. So determining the issues between, when to decide between whether it's a leave or it's a sick leave. So when attendance problems may signal a disability. So if there's recurring absences and they're kind of linked to maybe an ongoing health issue, it could be a back problem, it could be allergies, it could be some sort of a chronic illness that employee has, that could become a disability that is now protected under different laws, right? CFRA, ADA, those things. So we've got to really know when that employee is just out sick, or if there's an issue going on with them that's we've got to be aware of. And our awareness, it's important for us as employers to be aware. And if you guys saw the subtitle of this was, balancing compassion and compliance and trying to work through this. Well, this is where we've got to be aware, right? We do need to care about our employees. We want to make sure that they are healthy and they've got enough time to take off for their families and for their own health. But we need to be aware. It could come through direct disclosure, but it doesn't necessarily have to. It could come from casual comments that the employee makes directly to us. It could be to their coworkers, and we hear something, or they come walking in and they're half bent over or coughing and sneezing and or having some other issues that are visible. We've got to be aware of that, and that's when it's not up to the employee to come to us. It's not their obligation, believe it or not. It's up to us as employers to really look into that. So our practices can boost this, right? So be aware of suggestive patterns or comments about health issues or something that's going on. Make sure that you are just keeping an eye out for your employees. Obviously, the bigger our employees are, our bigger our staff number of employees is, it's harder, right? If they're out in the field a lot, you may not see them. You may be having performance issues out there that could be related to health. So it's a little bit more difficult when you got field employees versus office employees, but nonetheless, you've still got to find a way to determine that. The key is employees don't have to use magic words. I don't have to come in and say, hey, I need to take leave. I have an accommodation issue I'd like to discuss with you. No, employees usually have no clue about what's available. Even though we give them a handbook and we got posters on the wall, all the efforts that we make to notify them, they're not necessarily knowledgeable on what they can do. So they don't have to use those words. It's up to us to really kind of help them through that. And it's our duty. Train your managers, make sure that they know, keep an eye out for employees before they take action that could be adverse, and they don't even know yet that there's an issue or not. And we did have, I think this is the part I wanted to bring this up. We did have an employee once, that was kind of recently, where they were pregnant. This gal was pregnant and was calling out, had some, I can't remember what the health issue was, but she kind of made up some health issue. I think it was diabetes or some other thing that was going on with her. She was out for a couple of weeks and she came back, and now all of a sudden she's requesting, I think it was baby bonding or time off for her baby. We're like, you were pregnant? We never knew. So, they're employee, and I think she said, I was afraid that I would lose my job. And that should never happen. Our employees should know about this stuff. But again, we can't rely on them to know. We've got to do that work ourselves. Okay, so potential leave requires an interactive process. And I'm going to go through the leaves, I think, in a minute here. But so an interactive process is simply a conversation between you and the employee, right? We want to find out if there's any issues. How can the company accommodate them to get their job done and still take care of their health issues, whether it's, any adjustments to their schedule, to their workload, to the the work that they're doing. Maybe they can't lift, maybe they can't stand for a long time. The main goal is, let's find a solution that lets the employee keep working if possible. We really want our employees here. In fact, I'll tell you right now, my daughter works at one of the wineries out here, and she had a slip and fall. It was maybe a month or a couple months ago. And it was the company's fault, or an employee left a bunch of stuff, and she had a big tray of wine glasses, and she was walking into the back, tripped over this thing that was hanging into the pathway, and she damaged her knee. She hurt it really bad. She had to get an MRI. She was out. I'm thankful for my daughter. She was out for maybe 3 or 4 days. They're saying that she had some major issues, had to have the MRI. She still went back to work. She said, "No, I want to work." And the company allowed her to come back to work. She's been getting better and better, but she never really took a lot of time off. She didn't want to. She wanted to work, but they did modify her duty initially. She was not, walking around as much. So it's up to us as employers to determine what we can do to help an employee get back to work as much as possible. And we may have to, because they've got a medical need that's been, provided to us by medical certification. So that's the interactive process, and it's ongoing. It may change. Things may change as that employee's health changes or their performance changes. So this is something you've got to jump into before you take adverse action. We want to show that we've done this and document it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So when do we start this, right? When patterns of attendance point to a potential disability. Again, what does that look like? Every situation is different. We can't describe that completely right now, but this is kind of why we're going through this. So if an employee tells you, or a manager directly, "Hey, I hurt myself. I hurt my knee this weekend. I'm out," whatever it is, obviously the direct communication would be great if they would all do that. If they present a physician's certificate, says, "Hey, this employee can no longer lift. They can't do this. They can't do that." So we got to be aware of that. And like, how do we start this, right? So we got to get facts. We need to know. We need to talk to the employee, be open. We don't just jump in and say, "Hey, well, why are you out? What's going on with you? Why are you having problems?" We need to come to the table with some compassion and inquire what's going on with the employee. Okay. And we want to be supportive. And this is where the compassion comes in. I do care about my employees. I hope all you guys do as well. We want them to be healthy. They're way more valuable to us when they're healthy, right? So we want to have a supportive tone at first. We don't want to accuse them yet. This is why this has to happen early on in the process. Once you've become frustrated with an employee's leave or attendance issues, that's a really bad time now to jump into this process, right? We want to do it ahead of time, which is really helping the employee out too. They may not even be aware, as I said. So we want to jump into this as early in the situation as possible, ask open-ended questions, and really avoid privacy issues. Well, what's your medical issue? What's wrong with you? We don't want to go there. We just say, how can we support you? What kind of accommodations do you need? Do you have a doctor's note? How long do you think this is going to go? Is it a long-term issue? Is it short-term? Just open-ended questions. I think that'll help get that without jumping into privacy issues. That's important. So again, this is something that you really need some HR help on. So please reach out to us if you have a situation like this. Don't go it alone. Don't trust Google or ChatGPT to tell you how to do it, although they're pretty helpful, but please reach out to us. So at what point does accommodation become a hardship, right? If I'm an employer with 5 employees, and I have one employee that says, "Hey, I'm going to be out 2 days a week, because of this issue, going to doctor's appointments or, whatever it is," that's going to be pretty detrimental to my business. That's going to take out, 10 or 15% of my workforce, which is a small business. That's huge. Now, if I've got 100 employees and I've got one employee who's one of many in a particular department, could they take 2 days off for a few months? Yeah, probably. Right. So that's kind of where the hardship line is drawn. So the rules are very stringent. They've gotten worse. I can't remember which year, but it was over the last 2 years or so. Governor Newsom signed a new law that made it more, really more stringent again, more rigid, that the employer has got to provide evidence of their hardship. They do have some leeway. Smaller businesses will have some leeway in general with regards to what hardship is. But here's how to identify it. So the cost, if it's disproportionate to my budget, my company size, again, small company, 5 employees, I got 1 employee that's out half the time, that's a big problem, right? They can't perform their essential job functions. And we did have an issue, this one I was discussing earlier, where a company had unfortunately let an employee go a little bit too long with days off. And by the time they decided to deal with it, we were not aware of it. And by the time they started to deal with it, they found out that this employee had some health issues and required them to have a kind of a strange accommodation requirement. It came down to taking 1 day off a week to deal with, mental issues and anxiety and things of that nature. So that 1 day off a week, the company had to lower their standards for what that employee did performance-wise. But it's been dragging on for about 2 months now because the employee's not meeting performance. So for this particular company, small business, 12, 15 employees, it's a sales producer. So that seat in that business is valuable to the company. They've got to be firing on all cylinders. So when you've got somebody that's got a health issue and they require accommodation, you can draw that line as to what is acceptable. If they're able to come in 4 days a week and I'm only paying them for 4 days a week and they're doing 80% performance, great, I'm okay. But if they're coming in still 80% of the time they're here, 4 days, is that right? 4 days a week. But they're only doing 60% performance, that's a problem. But where's that line, right? If it's really affecting your budget and your sales or your production, then at that point you can say, hey, this is not working. And now you have to re-engage into that interactive process to see if you can make some adjustments. What can we do? And that's what we're in that process now, still with that employee. So it can drag on. It's unfortunate, but we're in California, so sometimes we've got to deal with challenging issues a little bit longer than we would like to, but that's part of doing business in California. So again, back to the reasons, but seriously disrupt essential business operations, as I discussed some examples. The business lacks other staff. I have nobody to reassign. I got 3 employees or 5 employees or whatever. It's too small, and that job can't get done. So now I've got to hire somebody, whether temporary or not, and that employee can then go back to his doctor, say, hey, this accommodation is not working. And then they have the opportunity now to go out on state disability. So we don't want to ever suggest that. We don't want to try to push them that way. We just want to let the doctor make that decision. But these are some of the reasons. So another thing, there's no suitable alternative accommodation, right? They can't lift, or they can't sit, or they can't come in 1 day, whatever that is. There's no flexibility around that, and it doesn't work for your business. So these are all some general reasons why, but it does require something that's concrete that you can prove, right? Lost sales production, lost coverage of a particular production unit, or some sort of a disruption where an employee cannot perform the essential functions of the business, which is now hurting you. So just realize that we can't just willy-nilly say, well, this doesn't work for me. So hope that makes sense. So here's the leaves. Just I'm going to give a quick rundown on this. It's a complicated thing. We'll have it's worth a whole webinar. So there's pregnancy disability leave, PDL. That is protected leave. It's up to 4 months of protected leave. It can go longer if there's additional disability issues. So that could be a long time. It can be intermittent. If a new mom comes out and she's still got some health issues, or a baby has some health issues past that 4 months, or even as part of that 4 months, they can take, a couple of days off a week, couple hours a week off. So it becomes very complicated. That's a tricky one. We have to be very compassionate towards our moms, because, that is a difficult job. But, we do have to balance that with the business needs as well. Medical disability leave, this can be to, take care of a medical issue, whether it's a personal issue or it's a workers' comp issue. Even CFRA is part of that protection. And that's California Family Rights Act. They get about 12 weeks off of protected leave. It can be intermittent. You've got to really track that leave. We help our clients with that. So if you ever have any leaves in any of these categories, please let us know. There's baby bonding, and that can be paternal or maternal. Obviously, maternal or paternal. So the dad can take a few weeks off, up to 12 weeks off to be with his wife and help her and bond with the baby. So that's protected leave as well. And again, it could be intermittent, and that's where I think the issues with attendance come in. Is if it starts to be intermittent and it starts to be an issue for the business, then you do have to address it and kind of find out what's going on and do the best thing for your business. But that is a challenge. By the way, we do have a staffing company here, and if you have somebody out on pregnancy disability leave, we can help you put somebody temporary in place to deal with that and help you. In fact, we do. I think we have a couple temps out right now that are working for some of our clients while they have somebody out on pregnancy leave. So that's that. And then caring for a family member. It's got to be a fairly direct family member. There's some rules around that I won't go into, but father, mother, brother, sister, grandparent, can't be like my third cousin who lives in Alabama, and nothing like that. But we do have, there is a little circle around that person's family. So again, they may not be fully aware of what is available to them. So we have got to determine, based on the situation, based on what they tell us, or we hear, or we see, how we can deal with that. And then this is what happens, is that if an employee's got an issue, they don't know that it's a protected leave, and they end up taking more time off, right? That's associated with whatever issue they're having. And that's where it now becomes an attendance problem from your perspective. From the state's perspective, it could be a protected leave problem. From the employee's perspective, they're just trying to take care of whatever they've got to take care of. It might not be malicious in any way, but it's, hey, I'm trying to take care of my family. So got to really look at all that. And you know what? I don't have my chat up, so let me pull that back up. It's got a couple questions, so we'll go through those at the end. Let me just get that. Okay, yeah, definitely a couple questions. We'll hit those at the end, guys. Keep on throwing them in there if you want. Okay, so let's get to some practical stuff. How do we deal with this, right? And this might be a little conflicting. I'm going to warn you right now. This you're going to say, well, wait a minute. You just said I should deal with it, be tough on it, but then you said I should be nice and I should be accommodating. So it's a little bit difficult, and that just tells you that every situation is different. You have to nuance it. You got to know what you've got before you take a lot of action. But how do we even know if there's a problem, right? So obviously, if something exceeds the paid sick leave threshold, and past the 5 days, I've got no more time left. That's a big one, right? So we want to confirm that. Check with us if you're not sure. There's reports. There's access to our payroll system, and you can tell whether or not somebody is out. That's kind of an obvious one. So now this is where attendance patterns become excessive. Are they always, are they taking a day off every month, which would be excessive? 12 days off a year is kind of a lot. The state even only gives them 5. So if employees are off more than that, then maybe there's a health issue. So we don't want to just come in and fire somebody for being off, 8-9 days a year. We want to find out what's going on with that. So are they excessive? Are they always on the Monday-itis and the Friday-itis? Those are no-nos. You're always around a holiday or adding an extra day to a vacation. They took a week off, but then they're sick again, but they're not sick. It happens all the time, and we've really got to look into that and see what's going on. So this is an important one. Is the employee using proper channels of timely communication? What does your policy say? You've got to stick to that. If it says you must call out before, 1 hour before your start time, or before your start time, or 2 hours before your start time, who do I call? Do I call my manager? Do I call the company? Do I leave an email? Can I send a text? How do I communicate? Make sure that is very clear in your policy, what they do, and then you can hold them to it, because that does become an issue down the road if they're not following procedures. And then, we want to, again, as I've said throughout this, confirm there's no protected leave issues. And that's where you do have to have some discussion with the employee, hey, what's going on? How can we, you've had I've noticed that you've had a lot of days off lately. Is there something going on that we can help you with? Do you have any issues that we need to know about? So you can have that kind of that open-ended conversation with them to find out what's going on. But definitely do that before you take a knee-jerk action to deal with attendance issues. And this is where it's really important, and I'm going to stress this heavily. Actually, I'm gonna wait till the slide comes up because I think I have that in a slide. Well, it is right there. Early intervention, right? So privately check in, discuss those patterns and expectations. I'm sorry, sometimes I forget what I write in my slides here. Ask about any underlying issues or accommodations. And stay empathetic. Like, I want to hear. I want to know what's going on because I care about you and I care about your health. And then, document that. Hey, it doesn't even have to be a disciplinary or have to sign anything. Just put it in the file or make a note to yourself. Hey, we talked, I talked to so-and-so today and they've got some issues. And then you can even confirm to the employee, hey, thank you so much for speaking with me about your health issues. We're very concerned about you. Please let us know if anything changes, whatever it takes, but just document that in a text and an email and a Slack, something that you have record of it. And just keep it verbal for now, though, other than that follow-up email, until you suspect a pattern, or unless you suspect a really bad pattern and you've got an issue to deal with. Again, sorry about that. My animations aren't doing right. I'll just pull the whole slide up. So when is enough, right? That's been a big issue for a lot of companies. They get frustrated. It's like, when can I step in? I've got all these crazy leave laws and California paid sick leave laws. And like, when I can't ask for a doctor's note, or I can, what's going on? So when it becomes chronic or excessive, again, the 12 days a year could be considered sort of chronic. They're always off. They seem to be off every 3 or 4 weeks. Or it's excessive. They're taking multiple days off, 5-10 days off in a quarter. That's obviously excessive. It should never get to that place. And there's no continued medical or legal justification. You have eliminated that by that initial discussion, which is really, really important. And you've eliminated that possibility. And then you've made some documentable efforts to exhaust any accommodation issues or needs that the employee might have. At this point, you can start to move towards disciplinary action. And that could be, according to your written policy. Again, do not count that protected leave and take adverse action based on it. But once that protection ends, you can engage with them, start documenting that process with them. And that can be done by email or a disciplinary form if necessary. But this is a quote I heard from a friend of mine this morning as I was talking to him, and I think I've always had it in my head, but we can't let bad actors stay too long. And again, it's kind of, you got to have your spidey sense up to know whether I've got a bad actor who's taking advantage of our policies and the state's policies, or are they just having some health issues that we can address? So that's something really important. So it's critical to have your spidey sense on and take appropriate action before problems come up. And that was a situation that we're dealing with now. Okay, coaching and counseling. So how do we do that? Again, this sort of filtered most of this in as I've been talking, but reinforce the importance of reliable attendance to team operations, clarify expectations, call out procedures, timeliness, attendance standards for your business. Very important that the employee knows this and that you've documented, that you've educated them on this as much as possible. And then offer support, flexible scheduling. Do they have some health issues? Maybe one of their family members is having drug issues or whatever it is. You can bring maybe an employee assistance program. There's many out there. We can give you some references to that, whether it's workload adjustments, if that works out. Just offer some support as much as possible, but throughout whatever they're doing. But again, at some point it becomes too much. So do set clear follow-up timelines, right? So I think I got a little example of that. I'm going to put that down here. So when you do that, summarize the points. Hey, listen, we've talked and you've been off some excessive days. We've determined that there's no health issues. Going forward, we would really like you to be here because that's your job. I would like to see you less than 2, no more than 2, or no absences over the next few months in order for you to be a part of the team here. And, record these efforts. Make sure that you're documenting this, before really formally disciplining them. But that's kind of part of the discipline process, is all this documentation. So just, again, I know it's sort of confusing. It goes back and forth, like, when do I step in and when do I not step in and when do I give them time off? And it's tricky. And again, just early efforts is the most important thing I can say. So when does it come? We've done everything, and now it's like, gosh, we just cannot tolerate this in our business anymore. After all options have been exhausted, we've documented it, we've eliminated leave, the employee continues to, with no improvement, right? We've done a performance improvement plan, or we've documented what they need to do going forward, and we've just kind of reached that point. So again, progressive discipline coaching not improved. You've given them expectations, warnings, opportunities to correct, very important. Multiple good faith efforts. You showed support. You've offered some flexibility, given them counseling how to be better, and they've failed to change. They're not improving, right? Again, double check. No protected leaves. I keep on going back to that. No other risk factors. Have they complained about wage and hour issues? Have they complained about scheduling? Have they complained about anything in your business that could be related to an HR type issue or an operational issue? We want to make sure that those don't exist. And hopefully they don't. It's really important to deal with those issues as they come up, but make sure that there's no issues. Verify that your absences are not related to leave. I've already said that 7 or 8 times. Confirm there's no pending complaints. As I just mentioned, there's no retaliation claims, accommodation requests, nothing out there. And ensure you've got your notes, documentation, everything is there. So I'm being real careful with that, only because I know that these leave issues are becoming more critical in California. And anytime there's a high complexity, or I think there's a slide that even talks about that, anytime there's increased compliance complexity, it allows attorneys to step in and pick those issues apart, right? If you don't do everything as to the best of your ability, to the best of legal considerations, then you could be exposed to an attorney, and it just takes one disgruntled employee to go find an attorney to file a suit. And they're not going to take it to court. They just want you to write a big check. So just be very careful that you are taking all these steps. So making that the final decision, and this is kind of, again, a little bit of redundancy here, but they've shown that pattern of disregard. There's an impact on operations, team reliability. There's a legitimate business reason, right? We don't want to just, hey, this is a great, he's taking a couple of days off extra, and he's a bad employee, so I'm going to use this to get rid of him. You still need to make sure that you've taken all those steps and don't move too quickly. But termination should only happen when you're confident the employee is unsavable. Every support option has been attempted, documented. That's really key. Goal is always the correct behavior. I think I've always used this analogy. Right, down 2 railroad tracks. On one track, we are trying to create the greatest employee in the world. On the other track, we are trying to set up a clean termination if possible, or protecting ourselves compliance-wise during that process. So always try to fix that. We don't want to end employment if we don't have to, but we can only go so far, right? We've got to make a decisive action at some point. So that's how that works. Okay, so how do we make things better, right? Got about another 10 minutes here, trying to move fairly quick, and we'll get to your questions. It's not too difficult, but I will talk about some common mistakes, right? Disciplining during protected time, right? Asking for doctor's notes while they've still got sick time available, disciplining them, while they've still got time available, not good. Allowing issues to linger. They're just going on too long. I've got an employee that's shown a disregard for his position, and we've allowed it to continue. They might be a great employee. They're doing really well, but now they've got this attendance issue. We've got to deal with it head on. Okay, so no clear policy or inconsistent enforcement. That's a big mistake. If practice what you preach. If your policy says this, make sure that you're doing exactly what your policy says. Be consistent about it, and be consistent amongst all your employees. Nobody gets favoritism. And then ignoring any health issues, right? We like to joke here that one of my employees, I think she's on listening, our HR Connie. Sorry, Connie, I got to call you out. But we would get excuses from our staffing employees, why they couldn't show up, right? Oh, my child was a little sick this morning, or my dog threw up, or my card wasn't working, or whatever it is. These crazy excuses. We could probably write a book of excuses. And she would laugh. She says, throughout my whole career, I've raised 3 kids. I've worked full time, and I had to be basically half dead before I'd miss a day at work. I'd have to be so sick that I couldn't come in. And now employees are kind of, just jumping at the gun to take time off. They want to work. I don't know. It's just the thing. So it's really important to understand the difference between having health issues and taking, excessive time off. But I thought that was a funny one. So Connie, hope you're laughing. Again, not practicing what your policies state. I sort of mentioned that before. And then you could have too rigid. Again, your policies may be too rigid. Like I've had some employers that, like, they're freaked out that their employees show up at 8:01. Things happen on the way to work. We've all got to leave work on time. Traffic is getting worse. There's always issues. If it's chronic, it's a problem. I'm always 5 minutes late, always 3 minutes late, or I'm always, off on Fridays. But if your policies are too rigid, your expectations are too high for your particular industry and your situation, you could end up kind of creating problems that don't need to be there, where employees feel like they've just got to take time off. They've got to take it into their own hands and take time off. We want to make sure that we're providing enough flexibility within our industry, within our business, to allow employees to live their life outside of work, right? And not expect them to work as hard as we do. I know all of us upper management and owners work our tails off. So again, you got to kind of use your gut instinct. When an employee is having, maybe personal issues, or they're exploiting your kindness. You can kind of feel it. So get that spidey sense on again and jump into that situation and try to figure out what's going on. Okay, so how do we build this? There's no animation on this. That's okay. So set clear expectations first day. Make sure that employee handbook is complete. Your policy is detailed. Always coaching before discipline. Try to help an employee through whatever issue they've got. Watch for those early signs. Conduct frequent one-to-one performance check-ins. This is really, really important. I don't do it here. I think I've done it once in my time here with everybody. So we're the gardener that doesn't have the greatest lawn, and sometimes, but we can do better at this. And everybody really needs to consider this instead of the once a year check-ins. How many problems can happen in a year, right? I can think of numerous problems that happen without checking in. So I think checking in with a positive, hey, how are you doing? How's your position? And, how are you doing personally? Everything okay? Just having that personal one-on-one check-in, maybe once a quarter, maybe, once a month for some businesses, but that's going to help your culture. Let your employees know that, number one, you want to be close to them. You want to help them to do what they do. But you're also looking for clues that there might be an issue, so they don't come up and surprise you and bite you in the backside. And, just create some flexibility with whatever you can do in your particular industry. Try to do that. Make sure your policies align with your industry. That's super important. So strong workplace culture, work-life balances. I've talked about them before. They reduce absenteeism way more than a punitive program or a punitive action would do. So try to be the good employer where everybody wants to come in and they want to work. That's really important. Okay, so just find a couple of final thoughts. Balancing people and policy, it's not easy. That's okay. And then also balancing compliance within that, it's difficult. Attendance management requires both structure and compassion. You got to blend those two. I've said that multiple times. Start by understanding why an issue is happening, not just how often. Consistency, communication, and documentation protect everybody, the employee, the manager, and the organization. So make sure that filters down to your managers, that they understand that they can't just take action without some documentation. When in doubt, err on the side of supporting the employee as much as possible, staying compliance with the law. And remember, even with great policies, every situation needs to be nuanced. We just can't just have a blanket action that we take when somebody's having issues with attendance. Oops, sorry about that. And the one thing that I want to mention, I sort of changed this. I don't think there's anybody there might be some folks that aren't clients of ours, but listen, we've guided our clients through hundreds, maybe thousands of issues, certainly hundreds of attendance issues, leave challenges, and many that probably you might be facing today. So we are here. We're here as a trusted partner. We love when you call early on in a problem and talk to us, because we can help you take those initial steps to navigate a compliance issue or a leave issue, especially with leave issues, because we've got to take some steps and document that. So please reach out to us. We're here to help you. We have provide a lot of different services for everybody, so we're always here. And finally, so next up is our top 7 compliance mistakes. That'll be in April. And join us for this. We're going to talk about the most biggest compliance issues, and there'll be a little bit about attendance and leave, but we want to get that out there. And then I think we'll do leave management for, let me see, that's April, for May. And I apologize for the break. We took about a 3-month break at the end of the year. We had some internal changes that we had to accommodate for, and there's a lot of year end. We've grown so much as a business here, and our year end is a very, very challenging time. So be there for that. I'll send out more information on that soon, along with our recording of this event and the slides. I'll send those out as well. And let's see if we can look at some questions. Let me see here. I don't know if that's showing up on screen or not, but let's pull this up. It might be on screen. If it is, great. Okay, so actually I'm going to take that off because I don't want to destroy anybody's privacy. Okay, so let's take a look at these. So the state basically sees available sick leave as PTO, correct? The employee can use it for whatever they want. Well, within reason, right? We can't, if we know the employee is going off to Disneyland that day, then we have to put a stop to that. But in general, they have a pretty broad range in that first 5 days that they can use time off for. Most employees will not come out and tell you, hey, by the way, I'm going to Disneyland today, or I'm taking off to Palm Springs with my girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever. They're not going to do that. So again, we are limited to how much we can investigate why they're off or ask for doctor's notes. That's a little bit difficult. So I hope I answered that. The employee can decide whether or not to use their sick leave, right? If they are absent and they don't want to use their PTO, what can we do? So that's an important one. Employees, they can, if they've got available sick time and vacation time, we've got to very strongly discourage them from taking personal time off. And we can do that while creating a personal time off policy. That personal time off is limited during the year, right? We can only take so many days off as personal, but we also say employees are required, or employees need to use their available time off before they take personal time off. So we've got to develop that policy, and I'm having a little bit of a brain fog on this. I believe you can require it, but I want to make sure, and I will go ahead and get that information out to you, just to be sure. Okay. And next one is we can't ask what's going on with the employee, right? Well, we can, and hopefully we address that during the slides. We can ask them in a compassionate way, what's going on? How can we help you? Are you having any issues that we can address, support you, accommodate you, whatever? We cannot ask specifically what's wrong with them, right? They may tell us, and sometimes I'd rather not know, but we can't ask them any specifics about their particular condition, and unless if they're just saying, "Oh, I'm just off," well, okay, I need to know generally why you're off. Are you out for a health issue? Are you out to care for a family member? Are you out because you're out on pregnancy leave? Whatever it is, so we can ask them why they are taking the time off, but we can't get into what their health issue is. Hopefully you see the difference. And how do we go about accommodating time off for school? Changes in schedule disrupt our flow. So that's an important one. So employees that have employers that have students that are going to school, and it might be you might have a younger group of employees. At maybe like we have a fun center client. They've got young kids that are mostly working there during the summer. Or in this case, from the person, it's a medical facility, and when they're going to school maybe to further their career. So that is a tough one, and that does come down to whether or not you allow them to take that time off. It really doesn't come into play with a leave issue or an attend or a sick time issue. It now comes down to what are they doing? What do they require? Is there any way to outside of that? Why are they doing it? Are they going to school because they're changing careers? I'm probably not going to allow that. I'm going to tell them to go to night school. If they're trying to further their career with me, then I may sit down with them and say, okay, what do you need? We can allow this much time off. Yes, but beyond this, we can't do it. You're going to have to change your schedule with your school. But that's a tricky one. That's going to come down to a lot of different factors. Again, why they're doing it, what the outcome is going to look like. How long is that going to go on? Is it just a semester? They've got a crazy class on Tuesdays they've got to take, or is it going to be a long-term issue where they're always going to be off several days a week? That has to be addressed from a business standpoint, not necessarily a leave or sick time standpoint. Hopefully that helps. What if you have a grace period and an employee chronically uses the grace period? So grace period meaning allowable days off, or I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I will reach out to you and we'll talk about that. And then how can I talk to an employee that has a very severe mental health problems that come up so suddenly that we aren't able to inform, they're not able to inform us until the day sometimes. Last time was September and they ended up taking a month off. So that is definitely a time for an interactive discussion with that employee. And say, hey, we've noticed that you've had multiple issues now. They do seem to come up, abruptly without notice, and we have concern for you. We don't want to do anything that's gonna worsen your condition or cause you any more, mental issues or health issues. And what can we do to help you? And if it is try to talk through that first. If it is an issue that's affecting the business, which it sounds like it is, you can ask that employee, say, listen, let's say after you've had that first talk and still having issues, or you don't get a satisfactory response from the employee, you then can say, listen, in the interest of your safety and your health, as well as the company's ability to operate efficiently, I would like you to go to your doctor. We'll hand you a copy of your job description. We'd like you to take that to the doctor, and we'd like to know, can you physically, mentally, whatever, perform the duties of your job? And we want your doctor to be able to tell us. But we can't make that decision. We have to ask that doctor to. Then once we have that, then we can determine, okay, back to that accommodation schedule. Can we accommodate this? Can we deal with it? What can we do to help it? If it's an otherwise good employee that's got some occasional issues like that, and it could be physical health issues, that something flares up, gallbladders or whatever flares up out there. Those issues, same thing applies. You, at some point, if you do not, it's affecting the business, you can ask them to go to the doctor and get a note that just says it's okay. Again, if I've got somebody with a bad back or a bad knee, I don't want to make things worse. I want them to go tell me that doctor, get a doctor to tell me whether or not they can do their job. So within reason, we can adjust their job. But again, that fine line between what's acceptable and what's not, you have to come up with that. Hope that works. Also, an employee uses their mental health diagnosis as an excuse for mistakes they make. That sort of falls into the same category. You can start talking about performance issues related to that health condition, but you do need to be careful because there could be disability concerns. There could be potential leave concerns or accommodation issues. So if I've got a performance issue that I suspect or know that is related to a health issue, whether it's mental or physical, then I got to kind of walk around eggshells a little bit around that. But I could say, approach them and then notice that you're forgetting to do this, or your productive, output is not the same, or whatever, or you're having some trouble dealing with customers, or whatever it happens to be, and I want to make sure that this is not a deeper concern with your health issues. And I'd love you to go to the doctor and make sure that you're able to continue to work at your same level. So that, again, very, very comparable to the accommodation issue, even though it's only related to performance. So it's kind of outside the attendance issue. And you got a lot of questions. No problem. We are here to help. So I will reach out to you sometime later today, and hopefully we can address some of those issues. But I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much for attending today. Again, hope to see you next month. We'll try to keep these going on a monthly basis, because I know we always get a good attendance. So thanks very much. You guys have a wonderful Thursday, a wonderful weekend. And if there's anything that we can do for you here, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye now.